What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for another installment. I believe this is the 19th episode of Bible Study with an Ex-Pastor, where we are walking through the Bible, beginning with the book of Genesis. And throughout this, as I remind you, or at least I try to remind you every week, this is not a theological deep dive. So for those of you who have a theological interest in this book, this conversation may not be the one that you're looking for. For those of you who attribute any type of truth value to this book and you're looking for conversations that are going to help you get to the truth of what the Bible is saying, again, this one may not be a great conversation for you. I am of the persuasion, as an atheist, that there really isn't much truth value in the book other than sociological, which is why I find all books valuable from that perspective, because they tell us something about the way humans engaged, about the way humans interacted with each other, about the way humans thought about the world around them. Whether it gives us any insight into what was true at that time, it gives us insight to the way that people thought about things that they considered true. And I find that absolutely fascinating and valuable to our growth and evolution as a species, to know where we came from, to better project where we could possibly go. Man, that sounded a lot finer than I meant it to, and then I messed it up with minute it. But thank you all for tuning in. I think this is going to be a good one today. We're going to be picking up in chapter 37, which is where Joseph's story kind of begins. Now, of course, it begins before this chapter, in the sense that we're told that he's born. We did learn about Joseph's birth before this chapter, but this is the chapter where we start jumping in his story. And in my mind, Genesis chapter 37 is where this book begins to end. As I've said several times throughout these conversations, from my perspective, from my vantage point, all of the book of Genesis seems to be written to get to this moment right here, to tell us about Joseph's story and to tell us about Joseph going into Egypt. Because therefore, you do not have an Exodus if you don't have a Joseph, All right, so are we ready to dive in? If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider joining our membership. No, consider joining our community, either through Patreon or through the YouTube membership program. Let's see here. You can also find us on Discord, which I got to do a better job of keeping our Discords in the descriptions as well. Oh yeah, for those of you who are enjoying these Bible study conversations, I mean, you're already doing half church anyway. Why not join us for our Sunday sessions, which are where we're building? It's a place where we're building community beyond superstition. So far, our conversations are not necessarily about the Bible or religion. Our conversations are really about building community, doing a community, and learning about what this series we just got out of, which was called How to Human, is learning about, what it means to be human. And one of the biggest differences between our Sunday sessions and what you may have found at church is that we're not trying to tell anybody how to think. We're not trying to tell anybody what to think, what to believe. Instead, we're just creating a safe space where we can all kind of jump into the conversation together. Now, of course, every week I do bring some information to share, but it's primarily to stoke the conversation, because I am as interested in what you have to say as you may be interested in what I have to say. So if you're not doing anything on Sundays, check us out. It's right here on the channel every Sunday without fail. Sunday sessions. And I'm absolutely crazy for doing this, because I've tied myself into doing so much on Sundays now that I definitely feel like I'm a pastor again. All right, so let's jump into Bible study with an ex-pastor. And that's what it is. I'm not a pastor. I'm an ex-pastor. It's a whole different thing. All right, so Genesis chapter 37, verse 1. And this chapter is styled as, or labeled as, Joseph's dream. So now Jacob lived in the land where his father had lived as a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when he was 17 years, oh, that was a period. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when he was 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Those would also be his brothers. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. You know, I think as many times as I've read this story, I think I skipped over the part where Joseph was a snitch. I think I totally missed that part, which is funny because I know when other preachers have brought this story, they've mentioned that Joseph was like, or we've mentioned rather that Joseph was maybe being a little uppity because he was the favorite son and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, we didn't even have to do all of that eisegesis because we could have just took just started right here in verse 2. Joseph's brothers have a problem with him because he's a snitch. That's why. This is where it had nothing to do with the coat. It had nothing to do with the favorite. Joseph was a snitch, and snitches apparently get ditches in this story. Oh, I like that. Just walked up on that one. All right, but we'll see how this kind of plays out. Verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his other sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a multicolored tunic. Now, this is something that I do notice quite frequently in the book of Genesis with the name of Jacob and Israel, is that even after his name is changed, it does go back and forth. So here again, and I think I called this out in a few chapters before, but you see, it says it's the records of the generations of Jacob, but now Israel loved Joseph more than, and so the easy thought, and if you're a person who says this, then I know you're not a critical thinker. But the easy way to go here is to say, oh no, 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 no. It's used as Jacob when it's generations. So when you're talking about the generations of a thing, it's Jacob. But when you're talking about the person, yes, his name has been changed. It's Israel. Well, before you try to promote that as the rationale, in order to do that, you'd have to completely overlook verse 1, which says, now Jacob, individual, lived in the land where his individual father and had lived as a stranger in the land of Canaan. So it's not consistent there. Jacob is individual, but then Jacob is also generations, but then Israel is also individual. And then the majority of the time that Israel is mentioned further from here, it will be generational. And I highlight that to say the reason why most times I am untrusting of people who say, oh no, this is what it really means, or no, this is how it really happens, is that that's not how I learn. I don't learn because you said so. And I just so happen to know that people are really willing to make up things as they go along and present it as truth, i.e. Christianity. Ba-da-ba-da-bum. All right, so let's keep rolling. Verse 4. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. Now I resent the word could not. That's not accurate. And this is me being nitpicky, but if this is supposed to be the word of truth, then this is not a capacity issue. This is a will issue. Nobody is incapable of speaking to somebody on friendly terms. They did not want to speak to him on friendly terms because he was a snitch. But in this case, the author says it has absolutely nothing to do with the snitching. It's because Israel loved him more than he loved all of his other brothers. And notice this has been a theme in this family. Remember the reason Jacob and Esau end up at each other's throat is because one of the parents love one of them more than the other one, and the other parent loves the other one more than the other one. Please don't get your parenting examples from the Bible. Doesn't seem to be a good idea, right? We're 37 chapters in, and there hasn't been a good parent yet. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. And to be fair, obviously I'm being facetious because we are Probably 200,000 years. It probably took us about 150,000 years of our 200,000 years development to get a halfway decent parent out of the mix. And we still struggling. We still struggling. Which is one of the things that I do try to sometimes encourage people to do when viewing humanity, is to view humanity on a spectrum. Um, One of the reasons why I separated from superstition and religion is because there was this idea that life was somehow better behind us. And like for me, depending on how you're defining better, but as a black man, hello, better back there? Nah, nah. And that ain't even just about slavery and colonialism. That's also about central air and heat. That's also about irrigation. That's also about the internet. I am a fan. So I also often encourage people to challenge themselves to sometimes view humanity on a spectrum. And when you do that, things that we call good today, you'll realize that we may likely call deplorable 100 years from now. And so when you see that, because of exceptionalism, we like to assume that we're the best thing ever. But best is relative. And so it'd have to be best relative to what? And as of now, we are somewhat isolated as a species, as every other species is. That's not a thing unique to humans. Every other species is impacted by a similar form of isolation from the other species, typically a language barrier and also a cultural barrier, which we don't often apply to the other species. But if we as animals have a culture, then so do the other animals. All right, I think I rabbit trailed so far that I forgot where the hell I was going. I was going somewhere. Did it have anything to do with what we're reading? I don't know. Maybe I'll pivot back to it for sure when we're premiering this. I'll see if I can remember where I was going with that. So verse 4, they didn't want to speak to him on friendly terms. Let's look at verse 5. Then Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. So they already hated him. But now dude is dreaming. Like, bruh. Now, I don't really know what makes somebody bad about dreaming, but if I imagine these people who are supposed to be, or at least I thought they were supposed to be adults, or at least young adults, imagining them getting mad because somebody had a dream is like the pettiest shit I've ever heard before. But it is absolutely not the pettiest shit I've ever heard before, because I spent 20 years in ministry, and these are absolutely the type of things that you run across in ministry. If somebody comes up in church and says, maybe in a testimony service, Pastor, I had a dream and I believe that dream was from God, you best believe that there will be people who are sitting in the pews saying, who do they think they are? They got a dream. But this may be a chicken or the egg type of thing. Did we put this type of behavior in the Bible because we were already impacted by this type of behavior? Or have we or have we become more susceptible to this type of behavior because it's in the Bible, and we are many times force ourselves to approve of what we see in Scripture? Or at least we normalize and rationalize, naturalize even what we see in Scripture. Okay, so they hated him even more. He said to them, please listen to this dream which I've had. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf stood up and also remained standing. And behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Yikes. Then his brothers said to him, and so you know what, like, if I was there with Joseph and he would have shared the dream with me before, I would have been like, hey, bro, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't tell them that. Joseph, he wasn't a sociologist. He wasn't a psychologist. He did not understand human nature. Because if he did, he would have known that telling his brothers that I had a dream that y'all motherfuckers was going to bow down to me is not a great way to build a relationship. You know? I was not raised with siblings. I do have a slew of siblings. I only grew up knowing two of mine, but I wasn't raised with them. But I am familiar with how dynamics work in a house where people are raised with siblings. Number one, I do have four children, so they have siblings. But in a sibling dynamic, even when it's the oldest child, nobody likes having to bow down to another one. You know, it's not a comfortable feeling. So bruh man shouldn't have did this. I'll just say that. I'm not saying he was wrong for doing it. I'm just saying he wasn't too bright for doing it. Now, you so close to God, God can give you dreams, but he can't give you sense. Come on, young man. All right, so I'm sorry. Verse 8, then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us? Are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he had yet another dream and informed his brothers of it and said, behold, I have had yet another dream. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. This brother, you already saw their response to the first dream. And you gonna come back and tell him again? Maybe he on some Kobe Bryant type of time right here. Maybe this is some LeBron James, some Michael Jordan, type of time here, where he's just like, I don't care how much you hate the fact that I'm here to be great. I'm here to be great. That's what it is. Seems like how this so far seems to kind of be the mentality that Joseph has. I mean, the story starts off the brothers snitching on his brothers. And then after snitching on his brothers, he come back and said, I'm going to tell y'all something real quick. I had a dream that y'all going to be bound down to me anyway. This is rough stuff. This is, wow, man. Like, you really feel like if Joseph's parents really loved him, they would have pulled him to the side and said, hey, bro, don't do that. Don't do that. I do that with my kids. If I see stuff that they're doing that's obviously going to antagonize one of the other children, I tell them to think that shit through. As a matter of fact, when my boys were young, we used to sing a song together. And my boys are 4 years apart. But we used to sing a song together. And it was, please don't antagonize me. Please don't antagonize me. Please don't antagonize me. Just leave me alone. The little song we used to do. We used to do all types of songs like that. But I did that to help with vocabulary and to help them, know how to articulate themselves. He's messing with me. Is he antagonizing you? And not to say that there's a difference between messing and antagonizing, because that wasn't the thing. It was literally just to help them with vocabulary and to help them feel responsible for their vocabulary. People feel really great when they're able to express themselves. Do some people watching of arguments, right? And one thing that will escalate an argument almost without fail is when one of the people does not know how to articulate themselves. They will become increasingly frustrated throughout the entire conversation and will escalate it. And they're not really frustrated with you. They're frustrated with two things: with themselves for not being able to articulate it, because they feel this thing and the words they're saying are not communicating that thing. And so it is pissing them the fuck off. And then because you're not doing the extra work of figuring out what the fuck they're trying to say, you are also pissing them the fuck off. So by helping people with vocabulary in a meaningful way, and for me, meaningful ways are often the things that bother you. Help give people vocabulary for the things that bother them, and it helps. So my kids have known words like monotonous and antagonized for a very long time, so that they could say, Dad, this is kind of monotonous, which is why I'm not enjoying it. There's my why. Or that Nate is antagonizing me, or Nate, please stop antagonizing me, and because we've sang the song, everybody knows what the word means, right? All right. So he got them bound down to him again. Verse 10, he also told it to his father as well as to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream that you've had? And am I and your mother and your brother's actually going to come to bow down to the ground before you? Now, before, like, I'd probably preach this as, even when you believe, it's difficult to accept that somebody else is being used by God. But actually, more appropriately, this actually, I said that a few times, this reinforces a common theme that I've seen so far in the book of Genesis, is that the characters are not actually believers, or at least not believers that anybody should look up to, which of course is part of the way we preached it, that God uses frail people, fragile people, people whose sin, whose righteousness is just as filthy rags. We do all of that good stuff. But in this sense, I'm like, based off of Jacob's life, it looked like Jacob knew that other people believed in this stuff, but he didn't believe it. And it's also the same way with this conversation, because of course I just said, hey, look, if they love this boy, they'd pull him to the side and say, hey man, stop antagonizing your brothers like that. But this is what they did. They pulled Jacob pulls him to the side, or Israel, or whoever he's going by at this moment in time. He pulls Joseph to the side, and instead of saying, hey, this probably is not a healthy way to engage in relationship with your brothers, he says, me and your mama supposed to bow down too. So he's not even concerned that the brothers got to bow down. That's not his issue. His issue is that he has to bow down. You know. Oh man, there's so much I want to say here. But that also means that he has no theology, which this is Jacob, that he has no theology that says dreams come from God. So in his mind, he does not see this dream coming from God. Otherwise, he's not questioning Joseph. He's challenging God. Hello. And see, either way you flip that coin, you're going to have a problem. So if you say, no, 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 he's not challenging God, he's challenging Joseph, then that means he doesn't believe in God. Hello. All right. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Of course, I don't expect you to agree, but I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't give a damn if you don't. But this did remind me of something. What is it that this dream that you have had? Am I and your mother and your brothers actually going to bow down to the ground before you? There is another story that reminded me of, and I should have told the story. I should have just told the story as soon as I thought about it. Yep. Oh well. Verse 11. And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. That's good. So Jacob does say, you know what? Are we supposed to bow down to you too? But then he says, you know what? Maybe there's something to this. I'll give Jacob, I'll give him something. Give him something for this. Then his brothers went to pasture their father's flocks in Shechem. Y'all remember Shechem, don't you? And Israel said to Joseph, are your brothers not pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them. And he said to him, I will go. Then he said to him, go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron and came to Shechem. A man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked, what are you looking for? He said, and this scripture is actually verse 16 and 17. This is actually the scripture for the city that I live in. I preached this scripture because I thought it was very odd for them to choose this. But verse 16, he said, I am looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are pasturing the flock. Then the man said, they have moved from here. For I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Jesus went after his brothers, and not Jesus. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Dothan is the city that I was, or is a city. It's not this city, obviously. But Dothan, let me do it this way. It's not this city. Yeah. But it's the name of the city that I was born and raised in for the most part. And I kind of live in it now. I actually live on the outskirts. My postal office is in another city, but my address is in Dothan. But anyway, this was a big thing. For I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. It's funny because obviously it was Christians who chose that scripture and chose this city for the name of the city from that scripture. And this scripture is absolutely talking about Joseph being set up to fail. And so, yes, if you are a dreamer, Dothan is where you come when you want to be betrayed. That's what it is in scripture. The city before it was called Dothan, it was called Poplar Head, based off a spring of water here and the poplar trees. And for those of you who know a little bit of Black history, poplar trees are the trees that are featured in Billie Holiday's song "Strange Fruit." Yes. All right. So that was just a little bit of history there, and a little bit of musical history, right? Um. So they said they're going to Dothan. Saw that part. When they saw him from a distance, and before he came close to him, they plotted against him to put him to death. Who did this? The people in Dothan, which in this case are Joseph's brothers. Joseph's brothers are in Dothan, my home city, plotting against Joseph. And my city decided to name themselves after that. Yikes. I mean, when you're looking for evidence that believers are sometimes not too bright, it's not hard to find. The disingenuousness of that. I mean, that literally means you just picked this scripture because the word was in there, and you like, oh my goodness, it's horrible. And so they said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer." And by the way, when I preached this, I did preach this in correlation with what we call in the Black Church King Weekend, which typically a lot of Black churches every weekend where there's a Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, we dedicate that Sunday to preaching, not always about him, but sometimes about that message and about whether or not that message is relevant to today. Because believe it or not all preachers agree on that, and nor did they agree then. The Black church was one of Dr. King's number one enemies back then. I'd suggest you look into that. But for many reasons, one of the main ones is that what I've shared in the video I did on Christian propaganda at the end, about that even the good that a lot of believing organizations do in the world, they don't do that good to do good. They do that good to recruit to retreatism. That's a whole nother video. All right, so now then, come and let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say a vicious animal devoured him. Then we will see what will become of his dreams. These are brothers who want to kill their brother simply because he had a dream that he'd be over them. It seems that they believe in this dream more than his parents does. But this also, again, just shows that there are no real God believers here, or at least not the type of God believers that I would have expected, right? Which I guess is kind of fair. Because I would expect, oh no, God gives my brother a dream. If I believe God is the guy and we all have a relationship with this guy, then I'd be like, no, we should honor this dream because this dream is God given. But no one in any of these stories so far seems to really honor anything based off of God rules, so it's just very odd, that they're like, God gave this nigga a dream, let's kill him. And I'm like, what? This is rough, man. This is rough. All right, let's go. Now, okay, so they're going to kill him to see what becomes of his dream. But Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands, saying, let's not take his life. Then Reuben said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. And he said this so that later he might rescue him out of their hands to return him to his father. Which is still kind of cowardly to me. Because you could have just said, Joseph, run! They trying to kill you. That would have been more helpful. You understand? But, he comes up with this plan. But so far, we don't have any reason to think any of these people are brilliant. So I should not be holding Reuben to brilliant standards. He came up with the best idea that he can come up with. We'll take it there. We'll leave it there. So it came about. My dog started barking when I did that. So it came about when Joseph reached his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the multicolored tunic that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. And now the pit was empty without any water in it. Talk about some foreshadowing. Then they sat down to eat a meal, but as they raised their eyes and looked, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead, with their camels carrying Eobdunum resin, balsam, and myrrh on their way to bring them down to Egypt. To be honest, to this day, I still don't know what the hell myrrh is. I've never looked it up for real. I wasn't interested in myrrh. But it is very odd that after you plot to kill your brother and after you throw him in a pit with no water in it, that has nothing to do with thirst, by the way, but after you throw him in a pit, let's sit down and have a meal. Let's celebrate. Like, where are the good people at, right? Like in this story, even the good people aren't good people. And just to remind you, who are these brothers who are doing this? These brothers are the soon-to-be figureheads, the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel. Oh man, it's like the whole story is literally just the justification of brother against brother. Dang. I just had some thoughts about civil wars and stuff with that. On their way to bring them down to Egypt. So they're bringing this stuff down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, that name should be clear, what profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother and our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. This is Judah. So, according to many believers, this is the ancestor of Jesus. Jesus comes from the tribe of Judah. Now, whole lot of stuff to go there, but this is Judah. So first you have Reuben, who steps up to do the right thing, and the right thing for him is, hey, let's not kill him, let's just put him in a pit. And of course he has good intentions, because the intentions are, I don't want to look bad in front of my brothers and seem like I actually want to do the right thing. So I'll pretend like I want to do something just as bad as what they want to do. And instead, I'll come back and try to rescue my brother later. To me, and it's just me, because my standards are a little different, that makes Reuben a coward. But then also, Judah, who says, man, I feel so bad for my brother. We just done threw him in a pit. Don't you understand? This man is our own flesh and blood. We shouldn't treat our own flesh and blood like this. Let us instead sell him into slavery. Sell his ass. All the Bible. Such a beautiful playground of bountiful reasons not to believe. All right, so this is rough. So then some Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled him out and lifted Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. So they brought Joseph into Egypt. Who did they sell Joseph to? Anybody know? His great uncle's family. This is who they sold him to. His relatives. Likely because it wouldn't be Ishmael who's leading this caravan. It would be Ishmael's children and his children's children. So these are Joseph's cousins. So Joseph's brothers just sold him to his cousins. And it's amazing how the scripture try to makes it, I don't want to say scripture, but how the author doesn't necessarily highlight it that way. And maybe they shouldn't have to, because the context is there. They're literally called Ishmaelites. But man, I would have loved if that said, and they sold him to his own kin. I would have loved for that to say that, so that we understand the statement that I just made 15 minutes ago, or it wasn't 15, but a few minutes ago, is that this whole story is literally brother against brother. It's division all the way down, liars all the way down, thieves all the way down. Reading this book, trying to get something from it, there's just, no, these are bad people. Bad people. But to be fair, technically, these weren't people who were supposed to be exemplified in the first place. The exemplification of, and I don't want to say deification, because that's not what I'm trying to say, but the glorification of many of these Old Testament characters doesn't come until the New Testament. Hello. Got to make these people look good to make your new religion look good. That's based off these people, Christianity. Um, so they brought Joseph into Egypt, sold him for 20 shekels of silver. That's a significant number. Verse 29. Now Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, so he tore his garments. He's like, dang, I came back to save him, and I couldn't. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is not there. As for me, where am I to go? So they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the tunic in the blood. And they sent the multicolored tunic and brought it to their father and said, we found this. Please examine it to see whether it is your son's tunic or not. Bruh, family must be really hard. You couldn't just show up and say, hey, we found our brother's tunic. You say, we found a tunic. It looks like our brother's, but hey, you see this motherfucker more than we do. You tell us if it's his. But then it's just, and this is probably just from a more narrative perspective as an author. And to be honest, to be fair, I don't expect, writings and stories that were contrived, more than 1800 years ago or 1900 years ago to align with natural norms and narration. But this does feel a little bit all over the place because Reuben returns to the pit. They never told us that Reuben left the other brothers, so they didn't tell us that Reuben did not hear this idea that Judah had. And so they didn't tell us that Reuben was not a part of this little situation. But then even when Reuben comes back, he says, the boy is not here. Where am I to go? Why would this mean anything to the brothers if they weren't aware that Reuben had this ulterior motive or this alternative plan? They're not aware of that. So what does where am I to go even mean to them at this moment? And so even the authors are doing some things of very presuppositional nature here that as an author, I'm not really a fan of. Not a fan of. And again, I can't hold them to today's standards, but we are reading this now according to today's standards because today is when it is. You feel me? All right. Then he examined it and said, it is my son's tunic. A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. Well, that wasn't hard. So Jacob tore his clothes and put on a sackcloth undergarment over his waist and mourned for his son many days. Then all his sons and all his daughters got up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, surely I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son. So his father wept for him. Now, Sheol is problematic for Christians, even though they try to pretend like it is not. But Sheol is definitely a very different concept than the Christian concept of hell. Because notice, Jacob is not expecting to go to Sheol as punishment. But I often remind people that nobody in the Old Testament was expecting to go to heaven either. But that's not just the Old Testament. By far and large, mythology during this time period, during the time that this text represents, the heavens were the abodes of the gods, not humans. Humans didn't expect to go to heaven after they died. Interestingly enough, around the same time that we get Jesus inviting people into heaven, we also get other believers or other religious practitioners also inviting people into their version of heaven, these are things I like to call people attention to so that we begin to see that religion has evolved over the years, which I don't think should be too hard for us to see. But it has evolved as we've evolved. And in the video I did, Why is Atheism Spreading Like Wildfire? I kind of hit a lot of those things, but you definitely see it. There was a time where, by far and large, gods lived somewhere completely inaccessible. And then that time came closer that that inaccessible place could be accessed. But then even as time came closer, that inaccessible place became accessible in the sense that it was no longer off in the sky anymore. So one thing that the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, and there's another group of people. Oh, and the Greeks and the Romans had in common is that they had started designating places, place markers, land places on their maps as to the likelihood of where the gods lived. So you had Mount Olympus. There's another one in present day Nigeria, or Kenya, sorry, present day Kenya. Um, and you had all different types of places, and you look at old maps, you'll see them there. But this was a part of our evolution as a species when it comes to these supernatural beliefs. That though supernaturalism once existed way beyond us, and we've been pulling it closer and closer and closer to us as we have evolved, and eventually I don't think it will exist anymore. And it's not just supernaturalism that we've done that with. We've also done that with fiction. You know, we've pulled things that are fiction from further and further out to closer and closer to us, to now we are literally living in a day and age where there are several things today that if we were to take back 20 years ago, those things would still exist within the realm of fiction. And not only has it done that, but there are things today that we engage that are absolutely fiction, but are more possible than ever before. And so, and I suspect that is ultimately the same thing that will, supernaturalism will kind of go to the same route. Is that it ultimately will be replaced? I mean, what need is there for supernaturalism? And again, this has been an evolutionary thing. So I'm not saying it's something that happens overnight or will happen overnight. It's already been happening. There was a day and age where it was considered witchcraft to take medicine. And there are still some circles who still view it that way because healing was purely supernatural. You understand? But the more the more we get a natural understanding of how these things that we once imagined as supernatural, the more we realize how we can do those things naturally. They don't necessarily lose their awe. There are people who are still awed by medicine, but we just finally get understanding. And so things that we once thought were supernatural possibilities, such as maybe healing cancer, right now that's something that's still supernatural for the most part. But few more years, a cure for cancer will be 100% natural. And of course, when I say healing cancer is supernatural, I'm not saying that it happens. I'm saying that's where we kind of put things like that at. And, so if someone told you today that they're cured from cancer, you'd be like, it's a miracle. Because as of now, we don't necessarily have public knowledge of any cure. You see what I'm saying? But as our knowledge changes about those things move from what we thought, oh, these things could only happen supernaturally, to now these things can happen naturally. And that's what we've been doing for ourselves as a species. I don't necessarily want to say intentionally, but it's definitely been the aftermath. And that's what sociology really measures. Sociology doesn't necessarily measure what will happen. Sociology measures what has happened, what is happening, and what we can learn from that. Not always to predict. And that's probably some of the biggest differences between the hard sciences and the soft sciences, is that the hard sciences serve as predictable values, or has a predictable value. The soft science have a reflective value. I think that was a good way to say that. All right, rabbit trail for a little time. So, verse 36. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. I can't believe I didn't realize we was at the end of that chapter that quick. So we got Joseph's story. Joseph, we've been knew he was born. First thing they tell us is that he's a snitch. He bought a bad report on his brothers to his parents. His brothers don't like him, but apparently it's not because of the snitching. It's because of his ego. It's because of this God-given ego that he has. God gives him these dreams. But just to be sure, I don't think the text actually said that God gave him the dream. It just said he had a dream. Me saying that God gave him the dream is from my presupposition as a former Christian who believed that all things came from God, you know. And that especially kind of knowing the end of the story, knowing that Joseph, that they do end up bowing down to him, then it does, if you're a Christian, you would think, oh yeah, God gave him the dream. But apparently, Joseph's family is not a fan of dreams, whether they are from God or not, especially if that means everybody has to bow down to you, even his father, you know. And so they ultimately decide to get rid of your boy, and that's what they do. And so they sell him to his cousins, and then his cousin sells him to Egypt. And so Joseph is, according to the Bible, one of the first Israeli slaves in Egypt. Aha! All right, so I wasn't gonna do chapter 38, but it is a filler story, and it is one that has had a lot of far-reaching consequences in today's time. Let me make sure. Yep. I think so. So let's just read it. Let's jump into it. It may be 39, but I think it's 38. And it came about at the time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hira. Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her as a wife and had relations with her. Now I thought they weren't supposed to be doing this. And she conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him Then she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and she named him Onan, or Onan. Onan. Put it this way. If you were a dude and you were a Christian as a teenager and you were serious about your faith, you've likely heard about Onan and his particular sin. So she gave birth to yet another son and named him Shelah, and it was at Chezib that she gave birth to him. Now Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord took his life. Isn't it great to have a God who punishes evil but doesn't punish evil? Because we don't even know what Judah did. Or did, sorry. I don't know. Okay. Judah's firstborn, was evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord took his life. It was Judah who came up with the plan to sell his brother into slavery. Apparently, the Lord did not consider that evil. It was the other brothers who wanted to kill Joseph and plotted to do so. The Lord did not consider that evil. It's very interesting. So the Lord took life for a sin that will not be mentioned, but leaves all the other heathens alive. Well, lucky us, right? Then Judah said to Onan, have relations with your brother's wife. Yep, this is it. And perform your duty as a brother-in-law to her, and raise up a child for your brother. All right, so I don't have to explain to you what's going on here. We've seen movies, we've seen stories. We know about a time in human history where things like this may or may not have happened. The brother dies, you still need to have a child. Children are very important. They're important for agricultural reasons, to be sure. And they're also important for inheritance reasons. And so this woman has lost her husband before having a child, which means she doesn't have an inheritance. And for her as a woman, that means she doesn't have an owner. So, yikes. Now Onan knew that the child would not be his. So when he had relations with his brother's wife, he wasted his seed on the ground so that he would not give a child to his brother. Now, this is just all types of traumatic, just all the way around. Number one, I feel bad for the poor woman who's having to sleep with somebody that she didn't sign up to sleep with and is having to have a baby just to kind of be valuable in society and to have some type of sustainability in life. But then for this brother to sign up to do the job and to pull out, that's like demon time right there. Like that's pretty low. That's pretty damn foul. That's yikes, and then, and it's, you're not just doing this for her in your head. You're supposed to be doing this for your brother too. But we've seen how these people feel about their brothers so far. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Well, what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord. So God took his life also. Now, again, God did not take the life of the people who plotted on killing their brother. God did not take the life of the person who sold their brother into slavery. God did take the life of a person who pulled out. How anybody can think that this character is rational, let alone omniscient? And that gives me a thought experiment. Maybe it's not experiment. Maybe it's not possible to be rational if you're omniscient. Okay, a whole nother story. But this story has been used to torture young Christian men into believing that this scripture is the justification for masturbation being considered a sin. Now, from what we just read, you can obviously see that that is clearly out of context. But this is what people have done. And just kind of pointing that out, the scripture doesn't say that. The scripture doesn't say that Onan was in a back counter with a sock, you know what I'm saying, just whacking away at himself. That's not a picture here. Scripture says that he had a obligation that he did not fulfill. And then to take that scripture and then to tell young men that they're going to hell or that God is going to kill them if they beat their meat. Yikes. That reminds me of a Dave Chappelle episode where I think they did like the Sesame Street version, and one of Charlie Murphy voiced one of the characters, and he said, "You don't understand. I make love to my hand. You don't know me, honey. I beat my dick like it owes me money. That's why I say, fuck it." I'm actually surprised that I remembered that, but it was hilarious to me. And I was a believer at the time. I was definitely a believer when that aired. But I didn't watch it when it aired. I ended up watching Dave Chappelle's show years later, because when Dave Chappelle's show came out, the church I was attending, the pastor moved his Bible study nights so that he didn't have to miss the Dave Chappelle show. Mind you, we had DVR at this time. But I just thought that was horrible. I was so holier than thou. The nerve, the audacity. But then I was like, damn, this is a funny ass show. Irreverent as fuck, for sure. Obvious with the little limerick that I just sang. But man, I know Dave Chappelle is a controversial character, but that's kind of what I expect from comedians. And I used to think it was just black comedians until I started seeing people like Bill Burr, Tosh Point oh, and dang, there's one I'm trying to think about right now. He's across the pond, and my atheist, y'all gotta know him. Oh, I like the guy who does the sky cake joke too. Dang, I know it, Oswald Patton. I like him too. But dang it, why can't I remember this guy's name? Because he is hilarious. But I realized like all comedy is really, well, I don't want to say all comedy because there is some reverent comedy. But the comedy I'm attracted to is irreverent as fuck. And I absolutely enjoy it. Now, with that being said, I do understand when other people feel punched down on or discriminated against by certain things that are said. And so I do try to walk that line very carefully without, yeah, I just try to walk that line carefully. But yeah, comedy's funny as fuck to me. All right. So yeah, this whole Onan situation, I don't like. And the church did a lot of damage to a lot of young men. To this day, I have grown men who reach out to me for advice on how to stop masturbating. Even those who are not Christian, because the damage has been so profound that these people literally think there's something wrong with them. And I'm like, yikes. Read a fucking book and stop listening to people in pulpits and on YouTube. This is one of the reasons why I don't share site sources and stuff like that when I'm sharing content, because I'm very adamant that I am not your fucking teacher. I am not your instructor. Stop that shit. Stop learning from randos. Like, stop trusting complete strangers with information that you're just going to consume and assume it's true. Damn it. No, that's how we got into this predicament. So no, don't do that. Don't do that. Please. You know, there's nothing wrong with seeing somebody on YouTube who's saying something that resonates with you, or even saying something that you agree with, or saying something that challenges you. But even as much as you may enjoy me, even as much as you may think that I am super bright, you should treat me as if you treat every other human being on this planet, in the sense that you should take every fucking thing I say with a grain of salt and should look it up your damn self, seek to verify it. And some of you may say, well, that's hard for me. Tough titties said the kitty, but the milk is still good. Life is hard. It's nobody else's job to make it easier for you. This is entropy. We live on a floating fucking blue rock. Okay? So stop looking for the velvet gloves and shit. All right? There are no hands out there that's taking care of this world. You're capable. You're capable. So no, you don't need me as your instructor. You don't need me as your teacher. And that's not something I'm going to sign up to be. And this is why I don't share sources and shit like that, because I don't want to feed into that, because I think that is horribly irresponsible. And as part of one of the problems with the public education system is that we gave these kids teachers instead of teaching these kids how to be learners. Okay, for those of you who don't know, education is a passion of mine. It is a passion of mine. I do not have any favorite teachers. I went to over 15 different public schools. Every single one of them were horrible. See, I don't mince words. Almost everybody I know who does have a favorite teacher, just the people I know, that teacher is not their favorite for any academic reason. That teacher is not their favorite for any educational reason. It's just because they were nice to me, or they let me get away with stuff. Because I'm going to say something that's unpopular. There are way too many people who only signed up to be teachers to have their weekends and summers off. And I say that because those people were my teachers. And I'm not the only one who feels that way. None of my friends feel that way. They all feel like they had excellent teachers. They also believe Terrence Howard is a genius. I digress. So the Lord took his life too, verse 10. That took us on a long rabbit trail. Verse 11, then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he thought, I'm afraid that he too may die like his brothers. So Tamar went and lived in her father's house. Now after a considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died, and when the time of mourning was ended, Judah went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And Tamar was told, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear sheep. So she removed her widow's garments and covered herself with the veil and wrapped herself and sat in the gateway of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up and she had not been given to him as a wife. So she said, so you told me that when this dude grow up, I could be married to him and so I can have a child, and he done grew up. But that's one hell of a time jump, because Judah's wife dies, and then there's a time of mourning. And then at the end of the time of mourning, we're at this point. But somehow, also at the end of the time of mourning, this point, the kid who was promised is apparently an adult. So how the fuck long was Judah mourning? You know? So anyway, and then Timnah, she takes off her widow's garment, which means she's saying, I'm not a widow anymore. And she covers herself with a veil. Somebody knows what that means, don't you? Somebody knows exactly what she's doing. And she sits in the gateway of Enem. Why is she with the veil on at the gateway? What is she doing? Let's read on. When Judah saw her, he assumed she was a prostitute, for she covered her face. Because, who wants to see the face of a prostitute while you're fucking? Just saying. Just saying. That's the comedic stuff. So, she had covered her face. He's like, oh yeah, there's a woman. I can't see her face. She must be a prostitute. That is the exact opposite of Islam, isn't it? Oh man, that's funny. These modesty laws. What just happened? Oh, I think I went over a chapter. I don't know how I did that. Don't look at anything you're reading now. Oh, beautiful. So I went back. I didn't know I could do that. So with my mouse, I can actually go over to the next chapter by pressing over. It's good enough. Good stuff. All right, so I got to remember where I was at. Down here somewhere. Covered her face, prostitute. Yep. Verse 16. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, here now, let me have relationships with you. This is Judah. Judah is sleeping with a prostitute, or what he believes is a prostitute. And God has no problem with it. This is the same God who just killed a guy for spilling his seed and killed another guy for whatever reason and killed a bunch of babies because some people killed each other. This is why so many preachers sleep with prostitutes, guys. It's because God is okay with it. And I say that somewhat facetiously, but no, there actually has been a healthy amount of scandals of preachers being caught with prostitutes, both male and female. There was a famous pastor for years. His career ruined after this, but he was very famous. He was very anti-gay, very evangelical, very fundamental. I cannot remember the name of his church right now. I can't even remember his name. Oprah Winfrey interviewed him when his stuff. Oh, I almost heard Ted Haggard. Was it Ted Haggard? That might be it. I'm not 100% sure. That doesn't feel right. But it kind of does. But I know him and his wife, they had went through these big things or like, oh yeah, we're preaching and we're the urban modern church. And they had did this thing where they put a bed on top of the church, like on top of the building of the church for a while to promote healthy sex and marriages and stuff. Because, and he was saying, Christians have the best sex. We have the healthiest marriages. This was literally his spiel. And about how important it was to be heterosexual and how important it was to be one man, one wife. And then when the shit hit the fan, he had like 3 male prostitutes that he had on speed dial. And they also furnished him with meth and coke. The story is not very unique. There was that was a white pastor in the Midwest. There was a black pastor in the South, in Florida. His name I remember very well, Zachary Timms, because many people said he looked like Will Smith. And I remember the first time as a younger minister seeing him on TBN, which was a big thing back in the day, and realizing like this dude doesn't even really come off as serious to me, which a lot of preachers didn't to me. But yeah, he ended up overdosing on coke while being in a hotel room with a stripper that he had been paying from Paris. No, not unique story. So apparently, God and prostitutes are good bedfellows. Ooh, will that be the name of this episode? We shall see. He said, let me have relationships with you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law, like he would have cared. And she said, what will you give me that you may have relations with me? Oh, she is a prostitute. All right. At this moment, you're not acting like a prostitute. The moment you've asked for money, you've gone from acting to becoming. Okay. All right. So he said, therefore, I will send you a young goat from the flock. Then she said, will you give a pledge until you send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give to you? And she said, your seal and your cord and your staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her and had relations with her, and she conceived by him. Dang, bruh sacrificed it all. I have so many jokes, and Bible study with an ex-pastor has never claimed to be family friendly. This is not a family friendly endeavor, not this one. Now we'll do a family friendly version maybe later on for on-site stuff, but this shit right here, this is for adults. But there's so many places I want to take this, and I'm not going to. But there's a scene in the movie Wolf of Wall Street when they're walking through the different levels of prostitutes that they brought in. For this man to be willing to leave his seal, his cord, and his staff with this random that he just met, this has to be some high level action, if you will. And this is before he's even had the action. So either that or he's just really desperate, which that's also a thing. I've seen people do a lot when they're really desperate and really lonely. All right. Oh, I did it again. My page is going to go away, and I'm going to have to bring my page back, but that's okay because I've mastered this thing. Bam. Look at that. It's because I'm using the mouse, which I think I explained. And so she conceives by them. And so again, there's another time jump. Unless maybe the authors of this story believe that people had babies immediately. And maybe that's why Shayla, or whatever his name was, grew up so fast. You know, who knows? Somebody does. Maybe not. Probably not. Most assuredly not. Okay, so verse 19. Then she got up and departed and removed her veil and put on her widow's garment. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. He asked the people of her place, saying, where is the temple prostitute, who was by the road at Enim? Which I was going to write a book years ago about temple prostitution because I had written an article about it and talked about it with another group of church leaders, church practitioners. Because like there's a lot more stuff in scripture than we're really, wrestling with, paying attention with. Now, I wasn't trying to legalize prostitution or anything, which I'm not. I don't think I'm against the legalization of prostitution. I am of one of those people of the persuasion where things are not regulated, they're more dangerous. And so I think by making a lot of things illegal, we've just created criminals by doing so, and then put the people who want to engage with those, whatever it is, at risk, So I often remind people when they talk about drug violence, especially petty drug violence. And when I talk about petty drug violence, it's not that the violence is petty, the drugs are petty, so, it's stuff like, marijuana, But yes, marijuana, people sell marijuana even if they just exclusively sell marijuana, which puts them in a interesting place in the community where we feel like they're still not great guys, but they're not as bad as the crack dealing guys, and so we kind of give them a pass or whatnot. And in some states it's absolutely legal, but the states that it's legal, obviously that means that those people can get insurance on their product. That also means that if anybody steals their product, they can call the police. When you're operating in an unregulated space, then there is no insuring your product. This is why this violence exists. That's the nuance I like to remind people of. The violence exists because the activity is illegal. And so when the activity is illegal, if you can't get legal protection, you get what I'm saying? If you can't get legal protection, that's going to include an uptick in violence because you're going to feel like you have to protect yourself. So someone, robs your house, let's say someone burns your house down after robbing it. You make it out alive. But let's say you live in a society where the police say, "Oh, there's nothing we can do about it. We know who did it, but there's still nothing we can do about it. We don't have laws against that." How likely are you just to sit back and say, "Oh well, you win some, you lose some"? No, no. And so, and I'm not saying that to create an excuse. I'm just saying that to give some insight. This is why I know other people are against regulation, but the people who are against regulation of anything are typically, are the people that I've heard be against regulation, um, mention this idea, well, it's going to be more costly. I'd say, what do you care about more, cost or people? You know, because prostitution is illegal in most states in this country, there's no regulation. That puts men and women at extreme risk unnecessarily, you know, based off of a business, venture that they want to willingly engage in, So yeah, I'm definitely a little free thinker when it comes to stuff like that. And I think we need to go back to the drawing board with some of these things. I'm a fan of regulation. I do understand the argument that, well, it's going to raise expenses. I definitely understand that, and if there's a way around it, I'm against it. But if we don't have a way around it, if there's a way around it, I'm for it. But if we don't have a way around it, I still think about the people out there who are unprotected, and that's what we do. Once we decide that what you're doing is illegal, we've decided that you're no longer worthy of protection, and so we leave you out there on your own. And unfortunately, that's where the worst of humanity is able to thrive. You know, and and when we consider that many of these things that we make legal or illegal are rooted in superstitious thinking and religious dogma, I don't think it's something that we as a species should be okay with. I think it's something we should all be speaking out against. You know, if somebody wants to sell their pussy or their dick, I think that should be between them and whoever wants to buy it. And that's this ex-pastor's benediction. Okay, let me stop. Let's wrap this up. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite to receive the pledge from the woman, he did not find her. He asked the people of her place, saying, "Where is the temple prostitute?" But they said, "There has been no temple prostitute here." Damn, because they've been watching. So he returned to Judah and said, "I did not find her." And furthermore, the people, I said that part. Nope. And so the people said again. Okay. Then Judah said, "Let her keep them, otherwise we will become a laughingstock. After all, I sent this young goat, but you did not find her." So now he's a little bit worried about his reputation. He says, now it has been about 3 months. Now it was about after 3 months later that Judah was informed, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has prostituted herself, and behold, she is also pregnant by prostitution." Then Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned." Judah went looking for a prostitute, found one, gave her some of his most valuable possessions, slept with her. Unlike Onan, did not pull out, and sees nothing wrong with any of this. But then he hears that his daughter-in-law, Tamar, might be a prostitute and might have the audacity to be pregnant from her prostitution, and wants to burn her alive. That's what it says. This is what I said. I have hard times finding the good people. And remember, this is Judah. This is the lineage that Jesus comes from. Hello. Joseph is the only good guy in this whole story. Um, yeah, this is rough. So I don't know if it's the fact that she was a prostitute that you want to burn her, or the fact that she's pregnant as a prostitute that you want to burn her. But then the story has already showed us that you're the type who gets prostitutes pregnant. That is one hell of a double standard. I can get the prostitute pregnant, but the prostitute can't be pregnant. What the fuck? Mm-mm. The Tale of the Pregnant Prostitute. Maybe that will be the name of this one. Okay, so verse 25. It was while she was being brought out that she sent word to her father-in-law saying, I am pregnant by the man to whom these belongs. She Game of Throned his ass right here. She also said, please examine these. Whose signet ring and cords and staff are these? And Judah recognized them and said, oh, she is more righteous than I. No duh, motherfucker. Since I did not give her to my son, which I said I would do, and even though I reneged and went back on my word, God did not consider that evil, even though he did consider it evil when Onan did. And it's like, this is rough. And he did not have relationships with her again. So this says, it came about at the time she was giving birth that, behold, there were twins in her womb. Twins are common here. Moreover, it took place that while she was giving birth, that one baby put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But it came back, and as he drew back his hand, that, behold, his brother came out. Then she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. So he was named Perez. Afterward, his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah, which is a very similar story here, this closing part, to Jacob and Esau's story as well. But yeah, so we made it through 2 chapters. Let's go ahead and see what next week holds for us. With my mouse again, and I like that. Oh, we're going to talk about Joseph finally being in Egypt. So we're getting to the close. We're getting to the close. And this is the good stuff. Like, I'm enjoying this. I hope you all have enjoyed this story so far today, and some of the insights we've been able to share. I cannot wait to jump into some of the conversation with you when this premieres, and we're going to have a really, really, really good time. I don't think I have much more to say about this one because I've rabbit trailed quite a bit here. And I think at some points this has absolutely pissed me the fuck off in many places. I don't like these people. I don't like this family. Like, you gonna burn this, bruh. Like, the hypocrisy. These are not good people. These are not good people. These are not, as we say in the South, these are not God-fearing people. But I kind of feel that way about a lot of the people in the South too. All right, you all. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me for our 19th episode of Bible study with an ex-pastor. I'm probably going to turn these into podcast or whatnot, because these have just been so incredible. I appreciate you all. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the alert notification bell so you can get notified every time new content drops. And as you can see, we stay consistent as a mug. And then consider joining our community either on Patreon, through YouTube, through Discord. Consider volunteering, check out our merch, and really consider financially supporting the work that we do. I can damn near promise you that you won't regret it, because we really are in this to build community. That's all I have for now. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay beautiful, only if you can. I'll holla.